Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to Project Chana Power Hour. Each week, we get together to learn and strengthen ourselves in our special mitzvahs of Kashrus, Shabbos, and Taras Mishpacha, as well as other halachas that are pertinent to women. And of course, our goal is to prepare ourselves and our homes to welcome Mashiach. Tonight's learning is dedicated as a schos for our Refuah Shlema Bakari from Menachem Mendel ben Bluma Basia. May we hear and celebrate good news very quickly. If you would like to dedicate a class in honor and schos of someone, please reach out to us via email projectchanapowerhour@gmail.com. Please join us afterwards for tzedakah, tehillim, and a Mashiach thought. Let's get started. For our first class in Hilchos Shabbos, we'll be continuing with part 12 on our topic of Muktzah with Rabbi Braun. Rabbi Braun is the Marata Asra of Crown Heights, and we are very appreciative of his time to be part of our program tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, I got a notice that the internet connection is unstable, but I hope that lasts only for 1 minute and we can proceed with the shir. I will just say one thing following on the comment before about sponsoring a shir. I wasn't asked to say this, but I think this is an appropriate time. We're standing in the 3 weeks, 9 days right before Tisha B'Av, and the Rebbe tells us, "See in Mishpat Tipada v'Shaveh b'Tzedakah." Mishpat refers to halacha specifically, and tzedakah obviously means tzedakah. So giving tzedakah towards halacha is a combination of mishpat and tzedakah, so you can't get a greater schus in helping bring about the goal and sponsoring these shiurim that are going wide. And not only my shiurim, but all the other shiurim of Project Chana Power Hour. This is not a personal bias. It's really an amazing thing that people are getting together to learn Torah on a regular basis. So whoever could support it is doing a tremendous mitzvah. Okay, now that we gave that plug, let's move on to the actual shir. So as mentioned, shir number 12 in halachas of Muktzah. And we're going to go through a few different topics of Muktzah tonight. Some of it we touched on in the past. As we're heading towards the end of Muktzah, closer to the end than to the beginning, some things need a bit more elaboration and summary. So the first topic is if a person has already Muktzah in their hand, they already picked up Muktzah for whatever reason. The halach is that if Muktzah is in a person's hand, whether it was chas v'sholom b'mezeh deliberately or by accident, they picked up Muktzah, they forgot it's Muktzah, they forgot it's Shabbos. They do not have to drop it. They could continue carrying it, even move it over from one hand to another hand without putting it down, and they can take it to any place they want in order to put it away in a safe, normal place. However, there's always a however. Those who learn Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch will be familiar that you often find a halacha, and then it says many halachas later, all this applies only if. Now, people learn Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, they learn one sif at a time, then they close the book, they can come make some mistakes. So there's a big Bamed Dvarim Amurim here. This dispensation, this letter, that once you picked up Muktzah, you're allowed to continue carrying whoever you want, applies only to those type of utensils that are not totally absolute Muktzah. For example, something called Kli Shamalachta L'Isra. As we've learned in our early classes, something which its primary function is for forbidden things on Shabbos, is a muktzah. It's a light form of muktzah. And a kli shemalach l'isr may be used on Shabbos if you have a good use for it, a non-isr use, a kosher use. And you may move it also if you need its place. So I'm going to use the classic example that we always give. The hammer, which is made for building, but you're allowed to use your hammer to crack a coconut on Shabbos. That's a legitimate use. So it's not really full-fledged muktzah. You're allowed to move the hammer if it's laying on your Shabbos table and you need the place. Things that are not full-fledged muktzah, once you picked it up, whether because you were allowed to pick it up for those permissible uses, or you weren't allowed to pick it up, in either case, something which is real 100% full-fledged muktzah, like muktzah machmas gufay, something which is very essence, it's inherently muktzah, like dough, flour, coins, sand, whatever, all those real 100% muktzah items. Even if you picked it up beheter, you were allowed to pick it up, for example, because it could cause repulsive, as we learned in the past. So there are cases where you're allowed to technically pick up muktzah, but since it's 100% muktzah, there are those that say that in this case, the heter of once you picked it up, you're allowed to move, it doesn't apply. What does the Alter Rebbe say about that? It is appropriate to be concerned and take into account the opinion that says that muktzah gomer, full-fledged, 100% muktzah, would be moved even after you picked it up. so you can't continue to put it down right away. If you picked it up a heter, as soon as your heter has gone, you picked it up because it shouldn't harm people, and now it's no longer in a place of harm, you got to put it down right away. The only time we could continue using this heter, even if it's Muktzah Gomer, is b'makom hefsid. If there's a concern that there's a loss, this dish, this utensil, this item will get broken if you drop it right away, so you could carefully put it in the closest place. So to summarize what we just now said, if it's kalisha malachta l'isr, not a real Muktzah, continue carrying it as long as you want. Once it's in your hand, you can continue carrying it. You'll not even change hands. If it's a full-fledged Muktzah, then the right thing to do is to put it down right away, unless there's a concern of a loss. So let me give you an example. Probably not relevant to most of the people listening to this class, but it's a fascinating example. A knife on Shabbos. After he finishes the meal, assuming he doesn't have to do any other bris in that day, he's finished for the day with doing his bris milah job, he's allowed to move this milah knife after the milah is over to wherever he wants to find a safe place to put it away. Now, a milah knife is a proper muktzah. It's called Muktzah machmes chisaron kis. It's first of all, it's malachta le'isr. Its primary functions for something forbidden on Shabbos. Circumcision is not something permissible on Shabbos unless it's a mixture of that day. So there's a special heter to do it on Shabbos. But in essence, milah is a forbidden item on Shabbos. It's made, this function of this knife is to be used only for things that you're not supposed to do on Shabbos, like bris milah. Besides for that, you're very careful with milah knives, and you don't just chop up your vegetables with milah knives because they're very delicate knives. So it's called chisaron kus. It's expensive. In such a case, something which is used only for Isser, and you're careful not to use it for anything else, it becomes a Muktzah Gomer, a full-fledged Muktzah. So although it's really Muktzah Gomer, and the only heter you have to move it on Shabbos is because you're doing a bris milah, which pushes aside Shabbos, you're not going to move a milah knife just because you want to put it away somewhere. You're not going to move a milah knife because you want to go chop vegetables. If just some mishugas is an iron cup, you want to chop vegetables with a milah knife. You're not going to move a milah knife because you need a place. You're certainly not going to move a milah knife, b'chlal, stop for nothing. Milah knife is full-fledged Muktzah, and it becomes Muktzah even if there's going to be a bris on this Shabbos. From the beginning of Shabbos is Muktzah until such time when the bris happens. It's not as if Shabbos milah came and pushed aside the rules of Muktzah, and therefore right from the beginning of Shabbos you allowed to move your milah knife. No, the milah knife is Muktzah. We allow you to move it for the mitzvah of bris milah. Now that the mitzvah of bris milah is over, you would think that you shouldn't be able to move the milah knife. You are allowed to continue moving the milah knife so long it's still in your hand. And the reason you're allowed to move it is in order to put it. And once you put it down, you can't move anymore. Why are you allowed to move the milah knife? Isn't this real muktzah? And we said with real muktzah, we should be machmer, not to move it, not to use a heter. So some want to say, well, it's a practical thing. If you're going to make a rule that moelim are not allowed to move their milah knives, if they're going to be machmer, not to move the milah knives, once the bris is over, first of all, just imagine all those bris on Shabbos, does the milah, drops the knife. It's not safe for the knife and for the people around, and most moelim won't want to continue bris milas on Shabbos if we enforce this rule. So we have something called hitiru seifem shum tchilasa. We have that sometimes in Hilchos Shabbos. We allow things at the end because of the beginning. We allow you to move the milah knife further on Shabbos in order to prevent people not wanting to do a bris milah. That's one explanation. The Alter Rebbe doesn't seem to hold with this explanation. The real pshat is because we mentioned that there's machloikis once you have an item in your hand. Machmer. Over here, in the case of loss, we're not machmer. Over here, it's a case of loss. If a male won't be able to put away the knife will be ruined. It's a very delicate knife. So in cases of loss, we can rely on those opinions that say that even Muktzah Gomer you're allowed to. And if you're allowed to move it wherever you want. It's not just moving it in that room. Once it's in your hand, we're relying on those opinions. You can move it wherever you want. You're not let it go, but once it's out of your hand, you can't move it anymore. The milah knife has to stay like that until after Shabbos. And again, once a person put it down, once it's down, then they can't move it anymore. Interesting question. Why shouldn't we say that the person planned before Shabbos? There's such a concept in Hilchos Shabbos, machshava. You could think before Shabbos that this shouldn't be muktzah. I want to use it for a regular use. Why can't you think before Shabbos, I want to move this milah knife? The reason why that doesn't help is Because you could think about something that you want to make a use out of it. You don't want to make a use out of it. It already has a use called Mila. You want to just stop moving after the Mila to protect it. So that heter won't help. The reason we let you continue moving it because it's already in your hand, and we're concerned the knife will get lost. Let me give you another example. Make dough and make challah on Yom Tov. That could be done. You can make challah on Yom Tov. You just have to know the rules. It's a bit complicated. And if you're making challah on Yom Tov, you might have to separate challah. Well, that's a stupid problem. You're going to separate challah. Nowadays, we are all tummy. All our challah is considered tummy. And since our challah is tummy, we burn it. We destroy it. We don't give it to a kohen anymore because we're all tummy. So what are you going to do with this challah that you separated on Yom Tov? You made challah. Now you separated, not to confuse, you made dough. The holy one we'll call challah. The challah that goes to the kohen we're supposed to burn, but we can't burn on Yom Tov. There's a mitzvah essay to burn challah truma that's tummy. But the problem is there's also a mitzvah called not of Yom Tov. Yom Tov is a mitzvah saseh, a mitzvah lois saseh. Burning challah is only a mitzvah saseh. So I'm stuck with this challah. I can't burn it on Yom Tov. I can't bake it on Yom Tov because you're not allowed to eat it. So how can you go bake something which is not for Yom Tov? Take the challah, I'll just go bake it. It's forbidden. It's treif. Take it and move it somewhere. You know, it's a big concern. You have a piece of dough which is not kosher in your house. So let me move it somewhere. No, it has no use. It's muktzah machmes gufe. This piece of dough is garbage. It's waste. Has zero use. What do you do now when you separate the challah? Zog the Alter Rebbe that what you do like this. The minute you said Harezu Challah, you announced and called it with a name Kriya Shem, it's called. You called it Challah. At that moment, it's still in your hands. Before you put it down, picked it up, you made it into Challah. Now you can move it to wherever you want. As the general rule of Muktzah, that once it's in your hand, you could continue moving it. And then you put it on a safe place. And after Yom Tov, Matzah Yom Tov, you will burn it. Why over here do we allow him to do it? It's Muktzah Gomer. One of the explanations here is also there's a leniency because first you're stuck. Have a piece of challah in your hand. What are you supposed to do? So therefore, we allow you to be lenient. Number one. Number two, it's different in every other case. It turned Muktzah the minute it was already in your hand. In all other cases, the item was Muktzah all along. You made a mistake or you were allowed to and you picked it up. But it was Muktzah all along. Here, the minute you separated it in your hand, it turned into a Muktzah. When you separate it. And therefore, we let you continue moving it. Let me give another example. This example will resonate with the people in the shir. The meaning is that women bench Shabbos licht, and after they bench a Shabbos licht, Ashkenazim have that meaning that we first bench licht, and then we make the bracha lahalik neshel Shabbos kodesh. Because it's the shaila about making the bracha after you do a mitzvah, they close their eyes before the bracha. They cover their eyes, close their eyes, whatever the meaning is, in order not to benefit. So you're making the bracha right before you open your eyes, and you benefit from the light. Now, some people, the reason we make the bracha after the lighting of the candles, because once you make the bracha, there's an opinion that says that once you make a bracha, not everybody agrees with this chumrah, that the minute they finish lighting, even before they make the bracha, some people disagree with this. And they say, no, lighting is not Shabbos. Lighting with a bracha make it Shabbos, but not, or a bracha without lighting. But lighting by itself doesn't. But a lot of people follow this chumrah. It's not very clear if that chumrah should be followed. It's highly debatable, but we're not learning Hilchos Neder Shabbos right now. So I'm just going to talk about those that have this minig. That after they finish lighting the candle, they take them back, they drop it. Because they believe that once they finish lighting, if you were planning to light 12 licht, the minute you finish your 12th one, the match became muktzah. You could continue lighting matches as much as you want, but you come to the end, then it becomes muktzah. So what do? You drop it. Okay? Problem is, you know what happens when you drop a match? It extinguishes. And if you tell me that you accept the Shabbos, so how could you drop the match? So you got to put it down safely. But 1 second, it's muktzah. You're also not allowed to move muktzah once you accept the Shabbos. So the answer for that is, it's not muktzah. It is, of course, it is muktzah. But once it's in your hand, we're allowing you, in this case also, we're allowing you to continue moving it. Even though normally we don't allow you to do that. But we mamash allow you to move it to the closest place possible. So you can't just walk around the match and find a nice convenient garbage can. No, put it down right there on the tray near where the licht are. Like I said, a lot of people don't accept this whole entire chumrah. Certainly when it comes to one of those lighters, some people have those fancy silver stuff to light the candles, which you release it and then the fire goes off. So a lot of people argue that even those that are normally machmer don't have to be machmer, but I'm not releasing the lighter. The lighter has an advantage. It's not even proper muktzah. A match is muktzah gomer. Those fancy silver lighters are kli shamalachti le'isr. A keli, which is primary functions for isr. And we said with kli shamalachti le'isr, certainly there's no problem continuing moving the muktzah. So that wouldn't be a problem. Let me move on to the next topic. There's an ambulance that's making a lot of noise over here. Give me 1 second. Okay. One more halacha about muktzah. Muktzah items that spread out or broke and they could cause harm and or damage. Now, you're allowed to take those broken pieces and move them on Shabbos, real muktzah, if there's a concern of a nezek, of a harm, injury for a rabbin, for many people. The rule, the gzeira of muktzah does not apply when there's a concern of or that you're allowed to continue moving the muktzah. Once you have muktzah and if it's real proper muktzah, gotta drop it right away. Here you have a special heter because it's in harm's way. But once it's out of harm's way, you gotta drop it. So let me give you a practical example. A glass broke in the home, and the glass pieces, which today's day and age, I don't think there's any normal usage you can make out of glass pieces. So you had a glass dish, was very, very nice. But once it broke, it goes straight to the garbage. Unlike an olden days that perhaps, depending on the size and depending on what type of glass, maybe people would use it in a broken glass you could use on the bottom of a dish. And we don't do that today anymore. So it's today's day and age, it's full-fledged muktzah. These kid broke a glass, that makes a difference who did it. Don't blame them. So you broke the glass, who cares? Glass is broken and now it's in harm's way. And it could cause harm to people, so you got to move it from there. On Shabbos, till it's out of harm's way. A bee, a mosquito, which is on someone's body and it's stinging them, there's no isser to take it off on Shabbos, both in terms of tzeda of capturing in such a case, and in terms of muktzah, you're allowed to go, it's causing harm. If it's causing harm, there's no isser of muktzah, you're allowed to take off the bee until it's out of harm's way. If something could cause harm, but it's not a very common form of harm, then you're not allowed to move it. You can use the heter of muktzah of tiltul begufa, which always is a very easy way out of problems with muktzah. Move it with your body, give it a kick, move it with the back of your hand, anything which could be harmful. You're extra worried, but it's not hezei kaimatsu, it's not common, it should be harmful, then move to tiltul begufa. We mentioned also one of the previous classes that there's a heter called graf shel rei. Graf shel rei means a pail which has in it things that people do in the bathroom, which is a general name. A dirty bathroom pail is a general name for anything which is muktzah, but it's extremely dirty and gives off a bad smell, something that's repulsive. So the halacha is, if there's something which is repulsive in a place where people are staying regularly on Shabbos, it's not in a side room, it's in a room, your living room, your dining room, it's in a place where people hang out on Shabbos. Then you're allowed to go and move a graf shel rei. We had a long shir about that. Be your dying mamash with your hands. So it's a garbage bag and it's giving off a horrible smell. Even though everything in that garbage bag is absolute muktzah, you're allowed to go and remove it. But again, in this case too, the special heter of moving it is only so long the smell is repulsive. Once it's out of reach, out of smell reach, it's in a different area where people are not hanging out on Shabbos. At that moment, you got to put it down. Because the heter of moving muktzah once it's in your hand doesn't apply to muktzah gomer, as we mentioned earlier. So when you have the heter, you have the heter. The minute the heter is over, put it down over there right away. And finally, I'll just mention one more thing about muktzah. There's a minority position that says that in a case of rephrase that. There's a machlokes. If somebody is going to have a hefsid merubah, a large loss, not stam a loss, a substantial loss, it's hard to determine what that means, a substantial loss, but it's not one, okay, you lose something. And halacha often says when it comes to hefsid merubah, you have to ask a rav, it's hakel it's always according to the determination of the rabbi. Let him determine if in your case that's considered a substantial loss. So whatever the case is, let's assume it's a very substantial loss. Did Chazal make the rule of muktzah even if you're going to have financial loss? There's an opinion that says, yes, you're not allowed to move muktzah even if you can lose a lot of money. And that is actually the halacha. There's another opinion that says that, well, depends. If there's a fire or there's robbers, in such a case, we have a rule called Adam Bahal al Mamayne. People go crazy when it comes to their money. And when it comes to a fire, they're worried they're gonna lose all their stuff. So we're concerned, we're gonna tell this person he can't save his items because it's Muktzah. He wants to get some of the items, take them out of the area of the fire. Or he knows the robbers are around, he wants to get rid of these items and put them away so the robbers won't get to them. So in a case like that, Adam Balamayna, a person is very concerned about his money. If we'll tell him that you can't move the Muktzah, he'll start doing things maybe that are absolutely forbidden. You lose, your mind stops working properly. Instead of the Rabban of Muktzah, he might start doing Isurim D'Oraisa, biblical prohibitions. And therefore, this opinion says, under normal circumstances, even if substantial loss, you still can't move Muktzah. But if the case of a dleika or a listim, a fire or robbers, you're allowed to move Muktzah. And the Alter Rebbe says, yes, we could indeed be lenient with that opinion. In the case of a fire or robbers, you're allowed to go and move Muktzah. Atkan, gute Nacht.
Thank you so, so much. Okay, for our next class, before beginning a new topic next week, we are grateful to have Mrs. Sara Morozow on our program as a bonus to our series on Peru or Review tonight. Thank you.
Today we're going to have a class titled Health and the Mitzvah of Peru. We just finished a series of classes on the very important Mitzvah of Peru. We had the Rabbanim talk about what the halachas are about this mitzvah, who is obligated, how many children do we have, is there any room for contraception? And then we had the Rebbe's voice pumping us with the right amunah and betachin, how every child is a gift, every child is a bracha, and the Eibishter knows exactly the right time where every child is born. So that lends itself to a very important question that every single woman, and perhaps every husband, will ask themselves at least one time during their marriage, which is, this is so hard, this is so overwhelming. Am I really supposed to just keep having children no matter what? Is there ever room to take a break? Is there ever room to ask a shaila about taking a break? And even if I ask a shaila about taking a break, does that show that I'm lacking in faith, that I'm not a firm enough Jew, that I'm not Hasidish enough, I don't have enough amunah? Is that showing that there's something wrong with me or my husband? So this is what I want to share with you today, based on the Rebbe's perspective. How do we approach when this feeling arises? And it definitely will arise in every couple's life. It's part of being married together and setting up a Yiddish Haim. So as a foundation, what we have to remind ourselves as Yidden is that all we want is to make Hashem happy. All we want to do is fulfill the will of Hashem. If we fulfill the will of Hashem, then we can have the real menuchas hanefesh, the real inner peace that what we're doing is the right thing. We are making Hashem happy. And we make Hashem happy, of course, that opens up brachas in our lives. And we should all be zeichet to see those brachas be'enei basar, with our very human eyes. We have two mitzvahs. One is Purvu. There's another very important mitzvah, v'nishmartem ma'od l'nafshesechem. It's one of the 613 mitzvahs to take care of our health. And whenever in Yiddishkeit we have two mitzvahs that conflict with each other, we have a protocol. How do we deal with this? We ask a shaila. Now there are three mitzvahs that we die for: Gilui Arayos, Shvichas Damim, and Avodah Zarah. Those three mitzvahs, the cardinal mitzvahs, a Yid is commanded to give up his life and not chas v'shalom transgress any of those three mitzvahs. Right? Idol worship, adultery, and murder. Purvu, like all the other 610 mitzvahs, if there's a conflict and it will cause harm to a Yid's health, we ask a shaila how we proceed. For example, Yom Kippur, we're commanded to fast. In fact, it's a very serious breach in halacha if we eat on the fast day of Yom Kippur. What if I have diabetes? Do I say, well, I'll go to the hospital, I'll get an IV, or I will faint, but I'll call it Sala and they'll revive me because it's so important to fast in Yom Kippur? And the answer is no. A frum Yid, if you're actually a frum Yid and you care about doing Hashem's will, you'll go to the Rav and ask a shaila. This is my medical condition. This is what will happen if I fast. What is my obligation to the Eibishter at this time? and following the psak of the Rav, that is the way you serve Hashem, and we do so, of course, b'simcha, that we're able to do Hashem's will exactly as the Eibush prescribed for us. Now, let's take this example a little further. Let's say it's not Yom Kippur. Let's say it's Tisha B'Av. Let's say it's Tainus Esther. Let's say it's Tzom Gedalia. The Rav won't treat each one of those fast days the same way. Each one has a different halachic implication. And therefore, we have to remember that the psak is tailor-made based on the person, his personal experience, the time, the situation, and many detailed factors. The same thing with the mitzvah of Pruvu. If at any time in your married life, the husband, the wife, or perhaps an existing child's health will be compromised, and we talk about physical health or emotional health, will be compromised by the mother getting pregnant and having another child right now, a shaila needs to be asked from the Rav. And the Rav will give you a psak. Which mitzvah am I mechayiv now in? Am I doing the mitzvah of Pruvu? Or am I doing the mitzvah of nishmartem nafsheseichem, taking care of health? Both of them are mitzvahs. Both of them are important. And because a human being is very subjective, and especially when we're emotionally charged, because this mitzvah brings up a lot of emotions in a person, it is so important that we go to a Rav to give us a psak, because the Rav has that objective opinion about how we should proceed in our lives. And in fact, I just want to quote to you, this is from the Rebbe, it says, if in fact this situation calls for a heter, then it is the Torah itself that is directing the person to push off having children. Same Eibishter telling us how we fulfill his holy will. And sometimes the medical issue is very clear. A woman after a C-section, she needs to take a break in order for her uterus to heal completely before we can accommodate another pregnancy and another birth. But that's even in that situation, a shayla has to be asked. Not every C-section is the same. Not every woman is the same. How long do we take the break for our uterus to heal? And in this case, here's a letter from the Rebbe dated Yud Zayin Kislev Tavshin Yud Aleph, where the Rebbe writes, in this, it is difficult to outline general directives because the ruling depends on the nature of the difficulty which giving birth could cause a mother and the type of birth control used. Therefore, I advise you that, after discussing the matter again with your doctor, when he instructs you which form of birth control he has in mind, you should consult a Hasidic Orthodox Rav and hear his opinion. Now, sometimes it's very clear-cut. There's a medical risk, and it's very simple. Most often, it's not so simple. We have the grays. What does it mean overwhelmed? What does it mean I'm falling apart? Parenthetically, the Rebbe did not want women to fall apart or houses to fall apart. And I just want to quote to you parenthetically, two separate yichidusin from important people, not important people, from the Rebbe, and we should take to heart. This one is to Mrs. Garari from Montreal, and the yichidus was 19 Teves Tavshin Lamed, and the Rebbe told her, Dein Esek is Kinder. Your occupation is children. You have to make things easier for yourself. If you will get help and let them do their work, then you will have the menucha, the calmness, to fulfill what you were created for. So if you have a cleaning lady once a week, you should take her twice. And if you have her twice a week, you should take her 3 times. And you shouldn't check up in the corners after she leaves to see if she cleaned well enough. And Rabbi Shmulu related a similar concept in Yechidus, and he writes, I merited to be in New York for Yud Shvat HaGadol in the year 5730. Mashiach Sefer Torah was completed. What an awesome Mashiach-like feeling encompassed our very beings. An especially uplifting Shabbos Farbrengen was followed by a Muktzah Shabbos Farbrengen, and Sunday night at 2 a.m. I was zeicha to go into Yechidus, a private audience with the Rebbe, and was flying high with the Mashiach spirit. The Rebbe asked me, how is your wife managing with running the home? At that time, we had 5 children under the age of 6. I was stunned and answered, Baruch Hashem. The Rebbe asked, does she have help in the house? To which I replied, 3 times a week she has a lady coming to help out with housework. The Rebbe then asked, why not more often? Is it due to financial constraints? Or there's no one available? And at that time, even wealthy people had household help only once or twice a week, and I just kept quiet. When I got home, I told my wife to add 1 more day of household help. But household help is not always going to be the answer. We can have a lot of household help, and still we're very anxious, we're overwhelmed. We dread waking up every morning, chas v'sholem, and things like that. We have to remember that the Eibishter, the ways of Torah are pleasant. Now, we could work very, very hard in life, but we have that pleasantness, that inner sweetness, that menuchas hanefesh, knowing that we do the right thing. But when we cross over the line to frustration, resentment, anger, and overwhelm, we have to think long and hard and reevaluate what's going on in our lives. And that's why I want to bring up a very important piece of when asking a shayla rav, which is to be in touch with a mashpia. A mashpia is there to help you organize your thoughts and help figure out what exactly is going on in your life that is causing the overwhelm and what is causing that feeling of anger, frustration, and resentment. And after walking you through your feelings, the Mashpia will help you organize the shaila that you're going to ask the Rav. A Rav can only paskin when he has the relevant information. A Rav is not a Navi, and this is a very important emotionally charged topic, and you want to make sure that you have all your facts straight. So when you ask a shaila, you could ask it coherently in an organized fashion, so the Rav could tailor make a psak for you. Sometimes when such a shaila comes up, it's important perhaps to ask your Rav in advance that you have a shaila concerning Peru or Vu. When is the right time to call? Sometimes the Rav may be very busy, and it's not the type of question that you want to have like a quick response, like you want to have more of a conversation. Giving the Rav the heads up will enable you to have a calm conversation where the Rav could give you his full attention and tailor make up psak for you. Now, the Mashpia is also there to help you feel good about the psak, meaning sometimes when the Rav tells us we need to take a break from having children right now, it could leave us with a negative feeling that we wish we were in a better state. Sometimes we have to take a break, not because of ourselves. Maybe something's going on with our husbands or something else is going on in our lives that's not even about us. And it may bring up uncomfortable feelings. And therefore, talking to the Mashpia should enable you to continue the path ahead with a certain inner peace and menuchas hanefesh. Sometimes you may have to call the Rav back. And because after you speak to your Mashpia or you sit with the psak, something about it makes you very nervous. And the Rav can't guess. He's not a prophet. He can't guess what's going on in your head. So the right thing to do is, after speaking to your Mashpia, is to call back and say, and give you some examples, because different Rabbanim work differently. Some Rabbanim will say, call me back after 3 months or after 6 months or after a year. And that could be very liberating for some women, that it's not a long-term thing. I'll bring up any changes with a Rav after every few months. And sometimes a Rav will say the opposite, like for your personality, just take that break and you'll know when you're ready for the next one. For some women, that works out better. Again, you have to work with a Rav. I also want to add that if a Rav gives you a psak that you should stay on birth control for X amount of time, that is your psak, and you cannot decide on your own that you are ignoring that psak. If you have reason to believe that the facts changed and you want to have an earlier time where you want to begin having the potential of Peru or Vu again, go back to your Rav and say, you originally told me I should be 2 years on birth control. I feel for these and these reasons, when you said the psak, the facts changed, and can I have a different psak at this time? Very, very important. I also want to mention, I get this question a lot. Oh, I just had twins. Do I have to be on birth control? Oh, I'm turning the age of 40 or 42, or when perhaps having children now takes on a whole new level of stress because of the high risk of miscarriages and perhaps unhealthy children. Or I'm now finished with a postpartum depression. How long should I continue to be on birth control? So I want to make it clear that in halacha, there is no clear-cut formula that the mitzvah of Peru or Vu expires after a certain age, or after a certain amount of children, or a certain amount of shalom bayis trouble, or a certain amount of financial trouble, or a certain amount of children that have various issues that make life stressful. There's absolutely no formula. The only formula that is Purvu is a mitzvah. You have to take care of your health, your husband's health, the health of existing children. And whenever there's a conflict, and when someone's feeling stressed out from the thought of having children, you must ask a shaila. Sometimes women fool themselves that I'm not really stressed out. But when you hear the pressure they put themselves on continuing to breastfeed, because if they're going to stop breastfeeding, God forbid they should become pregnant, and they make themselves crazy with the breastfeeding. Not that they find it pleasurable, but they feel like if I'm not going to breastfeed, I'm going to get my period, and who knows what's going to happen. Time to ask a shaila. A woman shouldn't be making herself crazy. A woman should, yes, we work hard. Yes, we get the help that we need, both physical help in the house, both the emotional support that we need. We have to surround ourselves with women that have similar values, that we view that every child is an additional bracha. We have to surround ourselves with a supportive Mashpia who understands the challenges we are facing. And we have to acknowledge that Hashem gives everybody challenges. And these challenges are there to just bring us closer to the Eibishter. And one way we actually bring ourselves closer to the Eibishter is by having that bittul, that it's not about me, it's about what does the Eibishter want from me. And in order to ascertain what the Eibishter wants from me is through asking a shaila, a rav. Sometimes we don't have a rav. Sometimes we don't have a mashpia. Mikvah.org has a helpline, 1-833-4-MIKVAH, 1-833-4-MIKVAH, MIKVAH. And we are here to help you. We could help you go through the process of figuring out. We could be your interim mashpia until you find hopefully your permanent mashpia, not just for the Misra Purvu, but of course, a Seiluch Harav is something that the Rebbe requested of us very passionately. It only brings bracha in our lives when we have a channel through which we could get the support of what it is really that the Eibishter wants from us. And then again, bring all that information to a Rav that really understands our situation. And we feel the Rav gets us, he understands us. And again, sometimes the psak of the Rav isn't so sweet in our ears. We could either continue the conversation with the Rav directly or call him back, or we could speak to our Mashpia, so that we should be able to move forward with Menuchas HaNefesh and with Simcha and Bitachon, and with that feeling of security that we're actually doing exactly as Hashem wants from us. So I wish every woman who's listening to this, if you're not yet married, you should be benched to find your zivug very soon, that you should be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Purvu. That if you are married and you're not yet benched with children that you would love, or the amount of children that you would like, that you should open up and bless you with Zara Chaylik Hayama easily and quickly with Menuchas HaNefesh. And for those of us that are benched with a dilemma of overwhelmed with the children that we have, you should be able to speak to your Mashpia and speak to your Rav. They should be able to march forward with your relationship with the Eibishter and your husband and your existing family with total Simcha and Menuchas HaNefesh. And may we very speedily see with our own eyes Mashiach's arrival and dance towards Mashiach with simcha and joy together with our families. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much. Bezrat Hashem, we are looking forward to a new series starting next week, so stay tuned. Okay, for our next class in Kashrus, tonight we'll be continuing our series from last time, Harmful Foods, Part 6, with Rabbi Nissan Zibell. Rabbi Zibell is the Kashrus administrator at the RCF, the Rabbinate of Central Florida, and delivers classes to the general public on various Kashrus topics. He's also highly active in answering consumers' Kashrus questions on a daily basis. Thank you very much for being part of our program tonight.
Very much for having me. We are now going to be covering Harmful Foods Part 6, Dairy and Fish, the danger of dairy and fish. The first 5 classes we focused on the danger of eating fish and meat, or mixing them, or cooking them together, and all the practical ramifications and applications to those halachas. Now we're going to be moving on to the next topic within harmful foods, which is dairy and fish, whether there is also a danger of consuming fish together with dairy Is there any danger? If yes, to what extent? Are we as strict as meat and fish? And specifically, we'll be discussing the Chabad approach, which Chabad has a unique approach to this matter. And we'll be discussing all this in depth and in length, as well as the practical applications of this, especially in modern day application, the way things are produced today, especially milk, the way milk is produced today in modern day facilities. Will have as well, it may have an interesting twist to Chabad's approach specifically to this. To get right into it, the whole idea of having a danger to eat milk and fish together is not brought anywhere in the classic, not in the Gemara, in the classic texts, not in the Gemara, not in the Rishonim, not in the Rambam, and not later on. It was not written in the Torah, which the Torah had codified Jewish law into 4 general volumes. It was not written there. And even in the Shulchan Aruch, there's no mention of it whatsoever. So where does this come up? How does this danger or concern come into the picture? So there is the commentary of the Beis Yosef, which the Beis Yosef was Rav Yosef Karo, Rabbi Yosef Karo. He was the author of the Shulchan Aruch, and he also, before that, authored a commentary on the Torah called the Beis Yosef. The Torah, just to give a little history so we can understand where everything comes into the picture, the Torah was the son of the Rosh, and he, Rabbeinu Asher, he codified halacha into concise laws, and he divided them into 4 different Turim, 4 different sections. We have Archaim, Yeridea, and then there is Chayesha Mishpat and Even Ezer, and those were the foundation basically for someone who wanted to approach halacha and learn halacha. So Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote a commentary at length and explaining where every law of the Torah is coming from and the background, and then as well he would express in there his own opinion. Not always would he agree. He would have his own approach and would discuss his approach as well. Later on, he developed his Shulchan Aruch, which was a very concise, straight, clear halacha, which was influenced by his approach, which was taken in his commentary that he expounded in the Beis Yosef on the Torah, and then he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. So in his commentary on the Torah, he mentions over there that basically, just to quote his exact words, Ein lechol dagim b'chalav mipnei sakana, that one should not eat fish with milk because of a danger. And this is in Siman Pei Zayin of the Torah, that Beis Yosef writes this. And he writes, and what's the source for this? He says, Kamoishin is bar b'sefer Arachaim Siman Kuf Ayin Gimel, like explained in the section Arachaim, which is the first section of the Torah, in Siman Kuf Ayin Gimel. And that's all that there is from the Beis Yosef on this. Now, the Darkei Moshe was which was written by the Ramah, Moshe Israelis. The Ramah was the Ashkenazic halachic codifier that later on came and wrote notes on the Shulchan Aruch to write what the Ashkenazic opinion is, because the Shulchan Aruch his was based on for what the Sephardim should follow. So the Ramah came and wrote his notes when Ashkenazim hold differently, but before that, he developed all his approach and opinions of what Ashkenazim should follow in his long commentary called the Darkei Moshe on the Torah. And over there in the Darkei Moshe, he comments on the Beis Yosef, and he writes, I don't know where he got this from. There's no source for this anywhere. This has not been, I've never seen this practiced, and I've never seen this source for this. And therefore, he concludes, it must be that the Beis Yosef made a mistake. And he mixed up the words and wrote b'chalav with milk when he really meant to write b'basar with meat. He says that the Beis Yosef mixed up the words basar and chalav. It really should have read, Ein lechol dagim bebasar. You should not eat fish with meat because of the danger. And he was not at all referring to milk, and there's no such danger. And truth, this actually makes sense for many perspectives, for many points. First of all, like we mentioned before, this concept is not brought anywhere. Not only is it not brought anywhere, we see stories in the Gemara of Amoraim that ate fish that were cooked. The whole idea of the Gemara over there is that they ate fish with a dairy dish called kutach. The question over there in the Gemara was because that fish was cooked in a meat pan, but we're not going to. That's a whole separate discussion. But we see practically the Gemara brings Amoraim ate fish with kutach with a dairy dish. That's first of all. Second of all, the Beis Yosef himself gives reference. He says we don't eat it, just like was explained in the Tur Archaim Siman Kuf Ayin Gimel. If you go there to that Siman, nothing is mentioned of dairy at all. Over there, it only discusses the danger of meat with fish, and there's no mention whatsoever of dairy. So that's another reason to believe that he was not referring to dairy, but rather he was referring to the danger of fish with meat. In addition, the Shulchan Aruch himself, which is the Beis Yosef, does not make any mention of this danger of dairy with fish whatsoever. And on top of that, he mentions that one in Siman Pei Zayin Yeridea, he mentions that when it comes to eating dairy, we don't eat dairy with meat and chicken and poultry and all that, but one could eat dairy with grasshoppers and with fish. And he does not mention any caveats that it's dangerous to eat milk with fish. So that's another pretty clear proof that he doesn't hold of it. And also other places in Shulchan Aruch, and later on in the halachas of Basar B'chalav, he mentions again, if fish was cooked in a meat pan and depending on various factors, one could eat that fish with kutach, with a dairy dish. So, and again, no mention there, no caveat saying there is, however, a danger. So from all these, due to all these points, most commentaries hold that this was actually a mistake, and there's no such thing as having a danger of eating dairy with fish. And that's what most Ashkenazi commentaries accept. However, there are those that bring Pesachei Tshuva and others that bring that there's actually an earlier source, about 300 years prior to the Beis Yosef. There's Rabbeinu Bachaya on the Chumash, not to confuse with Rabbeinu Bachya of the Chayvus Alvos, not connected. And in there, he writes in his commentary that the doctors have come out with a danger, that it's dangerous to eat cheese with fish, and one who does so can be in danger of tsaras, I believe he writes. So we see that preceding the Beis Yosef of 300 years, there is a mention of a danger. So some commentaries want to say that's probably the danger that Beis Yosef is referring to. So there is actually a danger, but this danger is not based on Chazal. It's not based on things that we were taught by Chazal. Rather, it's based on medical advice from doctors. Now, based on that, again, some commentaries take that approach and say, therefore, one should follow and stay away from eating dairy with fish because there is a danger to that. And this is especially followed by the majority of Sephardic poskim and commentators and authorities, that they take the approach that there was no mistake and it was actually referring to a danger that does exist, like we see from Rabbeinu Bachaya. And on top of that, they say just that he refers to a danger, and he says, like earlier in Siman Kuf Ayin Gimel Archaim, he's just saying it's a similar danger, because the danger that's brought by eating meat and fish is also tsaras, and the danger that's brought here from the one who eats cheese and fish is also tsaras. So he meant the similar danger, but that's the source for his words. And therefore, there are many of those commentators that will take that approach and say that there is a danger and one needs to avoid eating fish together with dairy. And there are also a handful of Ashkenazi commentators like the Levush and others that take the approach as well that we have to avoid this because it's dangerous. And there are a handful of Sephardic commentators that take the approach and say there's no danger. However, over time, generally the approach has been that Sephardim are strict and keep this and do not eat fish with dairy, and generally they keep it across the board. They don't eat it with milk, they don't eat it with butter, they don't eat it with cream cheese, they don't eat it with cheese, they don't eat it across the board. And Ashkenazim generally were not careful with this whatsoever. They followed the Darkei Moshe, all the other commentators that held this was a mistake and there is no danger. And generally that was the approach. Now, when it comes to health matters, it's something that's established many times in halacha. Just because a doctor said something hundreds of years ago, if it was based on medical experience, things changes based on time and places. You're in a different location. You're ready. Who said that it applies to you? In that location, maybe it applied, but in this location, who said it applies? And also the times. Maybe a few hundred years ago, the way the bodies were, that would affect them. So just because something was, if the foundation for the danger here is something that's medically an issue, who said we should be following that today? And that's another one of the approaches that those have to counter this danger and say, just because even if you have Rabbeinu Bachya that mentions that there's a danger and the doctor says it's a danger, who said it applies today? The times are very different, the places we live in are very different, and therefore that doesn't mean at all that today there would be any medical danger whatsoever when it comes to that. Ultimately, practically speaking, what's the Chabad's approach? Do we follow the Ashkenazi approach? Do we follow the Sephardi approach? Do we take a different approach? So actually, there's the Chabad before the Rebbe's Rishimis were published and were accessible. The Rebbe's Rishimis are the Rebbe's personal diary, which after Gimel Tammuz, people had access to and published it. And in there was described a bit more about this, the Chabad's approach to this custom, this danger. And before that, before Gimel Tammuz, what Hasidim generally followed and practiced. And we'll discuss both, because both of it will give us an idea and some light as to what we should be practically doing. So first of all, off the bat, we have Rabbi Landau, which was the Rav, and at times the Shab, Rabbi Yankel Landau, which he says that the Rebbeim for sure were careful with this danger and did not consume dairy and fish. But he doesn't give much details to what extent. Practically speaking, we do know there are witnesses that saw the Rebbetzin prepare for the Rebbe a plate of food that did have on it sardines and cottage cheese, or fish and cottage cheese, and Rabbi Braun as well had testified to people that he saw the Rebbe have sardines and cottage cheese on the same plate, eating together, seemingly being eaten together. So that would mean maybe there's an exception for cheese, but we just know generally that the Rebbeim, at least again, this is all based on before we had the Rishimis, basically what information there was. The Rebbeim kept it, and people were aware that the Rebbe did eat sardines with cottage cheese, so that was maybe there's room to be lenient for cheese. And on top of that, there was I've heard personally from people that looked into it and heard from Chassidim in Russia that they would practice the following. There was a richer type of milk drink in Russia, which I believe was called slivki or something like that. And what was unique about this richer milk was that they would take regular milk and add cream to it to make it thicker and richer. And it was maybe used to give extra nutrients to someone that needed it more, to stay warmer, to have more fat in the winter, whatever the reason was. But this drink, because it was not just plain milk, but it was changed, and now it has a new name. It's not just milk. It's now called it had a new name. It's not just the regular name of milk in Russian. It has a special designated name. That already for Chassidim was enough that it's not considered milk anymore, and they were fine having that with fish. In addition, Rabbi Ginsburg in his Kashrus, before the Rishimis were printed, brings that he heard from Chassidim that in Russia they would eat salted fish with milk. They had no issue with that because the fish was salted. It was fine. So far it seems like the fact that something was changed and there's a new product, or the product has something added to it, that was already a reason to be more lenient and to have either changed fish with milk or changed milk with fish, but that was already a reason to do it. Once the Rishimis came out, then we have clarity, because over there it gives exactly what the official Chabad approach is. Although even within Rishimis, there are questions exactly how to understand it, and we'll try to go through it. We're first going to start. I'll share on the screen the Rishimis and the Rishimah of the Rebbe about this specific topic, and we'll discuss it and we'll go through it and apply practically to what we need to know. So we'll start here. We have the Rishimah of the Rebbe, and it's in Rishimis. It's a Cheveres Kuf Pei Hey, installment 185 on page 397. And the top over here brings from the Rebbe, Isur Dagim B'chalav, the prohibition of eating fish with milk. Chayshvim Leplitas Akumus, we consider it a slip of the pen, meaning it's a mistake that the pen was writing and wrote the wrong word. As we mentioned, the Darkei Moshe already said that it must be that for the Beis Yosef, when he was writing, he meant to write, you can't have fish with meat, bebasar, and he wrote by mistake bechalav, but he meant bebasar, and it was just a slip of pen, and by mistake wrote the wrong word. So the Rebbe writes that we start off by, we consider it a mistake. Aval b'chazir, but nevertheless, even though we consider it a mistake, ma'arvin oidma, we still mix something into the milk. Chema, butter, or smetana. Smetana is the fat that floats to the top of the milk. Naturally, when milk is not homogenized and processed the way it is today, the fat will naturally rise to the top. It will be very fatty. The heavy cream, so that's usually smetana. And the Rebbe ends off, Kol Zeh Hiram and Tzemach Tzedek. All this is a directive of the Tzemach Tzedek on this approach. So it's interesting, because on the one hand, it's saying it's a mistake. Mistake means he made the Beis Yosef made a mistake, and it should have written a totally different word. It should have said you can't have fish with meat. So that means really there's no danger. It's a mistake. But on the other hand, it still says we still nevertheless don't have fish with milk. Rather, we mix something into the milk first, and then we can have them together. And by mixing butter into the milk, by mixing heavy cream, that's enough. So the question is, if it's a mistake, why do we keep it? If it's a mistake, it means there's no danger whatsoever. Why are we keeping it? And if we practically are keeping it, then that means we do believe there is some sort of danger. So why do we need to mention that it was a mistake? Just mention we keep the danger, and we only avoid the milk, and it's okay if we mix butter. Why do you have to mention that there was a mistake? Why is that necessary to know for practical reasons, to know how to deal with it? Why do we need to know it's a mistake? So very briefly, there are two explanations what it means a mistake. Some say it's a printing mistake. The Beis Yosef himself actually also wrote you can't have fish with meat, but later on the printers made a mistake. But from the Darkei Moshe, it seems he writes that the Beis Yosef himself made a mistake, and by mistake switched the words by mistake. And it seems like the Beis Yosef, the Tzemach Tzedek is taking that approach as well. Pleitas HaKlumus clearly indicates that there was a slip of the pen when he wrote it. Based on that, it was a slip of the pen. We believe there's no danger, but at the end of the day, because the Beis Yosef wrote it, and we want to respect the words of a tzaddik, and tremendous tzaddik that we know have a tradition that everybody up until the Shach and Taz wrote with Ruach HaKodesh. That means even the slip of a pen has a significance. So we keep it literally. We don't eat fish with literal milk, straight up milk. But the moment we even mix something else into the milk, like butter or cream, then it's already enough. And that's enough already to make it. This is not any more straight up milk. And like we mentioned earlier, even in Russia, the name would change if you added heavy cream to the milk. It would have a different name. We will continue discussing more practical applications. However, now we run out of time. Thank you very much for having me, and have a good evening.
Wow, thank you so, so much. That was so enlightening. Okay, before we conclude with Tehillim and Mashiach thought, we'd like to reach out to all of you, our listeners. If you enjoy these important and practical weekly classes, please consider partnering with us to keep them going. We rely on and appreciate all contributions, any amount. You can log on to mikvah.org/donate and select Project Chana Power Hour to go towards our program. Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and give a little tzedakah. You can do that with a physical coin or with the Kailal Chabad app that I don't know if you can see because of my blurry screen, but you will hear it in a second because it makes a sound. Go ahead and give a little tzedakah, and we will go ahead and say the Rabbi's capital together, as well as capital Chaf for Eretz Yisrael. Shir Hamalais LaDavid Lulei Adonai Shahayalanu Yaimar Na Yisrael Lulei Adonai Shahayalanu B'kum Alinu Adam Azai Chaim B'Laonu B'Charas Apam Banu Azai Hamayim Shtafonu Nachla Avar Al Nafshenu Azai Avar Al Nafshenu Hamayim Hazei Dainim Baruch Adonai Shalenu Sunanu Taraf L'Shineim Nafshenu Kitzipur Nimel Tamipach Yaikshim Hapach Nishbar Anachnu Nimatnu Azreinu B'Shem Adonai Isi Shemayim Ba'aretz. And now we'll say capital Chaf, keeping in mind all of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. Lamnateach Mizmer David Yan Chadinai B'Yem Tzara Yisagav Chashem Elahei Yaakov Yishlach Azrcha Mikaidash Tziani Sadaka Yizkar Chom Chesacha B'Elas Chedach Shnesela Yiten L'Chach V'Vacha B'Chol Tzas Chayim Mali Niranu Nabi Shuasecha B'Shem Elahinu Nidgal Yimali Adonai Kol Mishal Izacha Ati Yedayti Ki Yeshia Adonai Mishicha Yani Mish Mekachay B'Gvoras Yisha Yiminai Il Barachav Ve'il Basosim B'Anachnu B'Shem Adonai Elahinu Naskar Hima Karu V'Nafalo B'Anachnu Kamnu B'Anis Aydad Adonai Hashia Hamelech Yaninu B'Yam Karenu. And stick with us here for just another minute. We're just going to share a Mashiach thought, which is from a Sikha the Rabbi said, Parshas Dvarim Taf Shin Nun, which is the year 1990, which is that in the 3 weeks, a Yid should not despair. Even though we appreciate the fact that we're in a it's a big descent, and it's a sad, difficult time, we have to consider it as the beginning of the construction of the third Beis HaMikdash. And on the contrary, the void, the vacuum that's created by the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash will awaken a new and deeper level of our Avodah, including the development of new concepts of halacha, of Torah law, which I guess would be relevant to this shir. This in turn will lead to the fulfillment of the nevuah, which is Torah chadasha mi'iti tete, a new Torah will emerge from me. May it be tonight. Okay, a few quick reminders before we finish up. If you appreciate these weekly classes, share them with friends and family, or anyone else who you think would listen to them or appreciate them. All playbacks are available on mikvah.org/power hour, and also on all podcast platforms, as well as 24/6. You can just search up Project Chana Power Hour. If you have questions on classes or would like to dedicate a week of learning and honor someone, you may reach out to us via email, projectchanapowerhour@gmail.com. And lastly, we look forward to seeing you again next week, and may our learning prepare us in our homes and bring every Yid home to Eretz Yisrael with Mashiach now. Thank you so much for joining, and have a good night.